Okay, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to day 2 of the Hope Beyond Hurt conference. I don't know if you're all aware, but we almost had a crisis this morning, an interruption of power. Some people would say we've been operating without power on this island for many centuries, but we'll just let that slide by, if that's okay. It's said of all of them, all of the above, kind of. You're very welcome. It's great to see so many of you back, first of all, and all looking fit and well and refreshed and energized and inspired and all of that. I will try and knock that out of you over the next couple of hours or so. My job, first of all, is just to kind of have an overview or reflection on day 1 of the conference, and to let you know what's going to be happening on day 2. The main part of day 2, in a sense, will be a discussion with the chairs of learning who were here yesterday, who were dispersed to various parts of the city and who conducted workshops with people. So I'm very keen to find out what they shared with people at those workshops and what they themselves maybe got in return. After that, we'll have Eamon and Helen up as well to join us in that discussion, and again to see what they have got from this event. They're the people behind it in that sense. So I'm interested in terms of their expectations and how those expectations were maybe matched, perhaps even exceeded. So we'll find that out. And after that, I'm looking forward to a conversation I'll be having with Giles here, Giles Dooley, one of the chairs of learning, the chair of illumination, about his latest, forthcoming book, which it's a photographic book, and if you want to talk about the power of the photographic image to move people, this book would certainly do that, and I'm looking forward to that conversation. But not just about the book. I want to find out more about Giles, the photographer, and that story is an interesting one in so many ways, and it has chopped and changed at different parts of his career, so I'll be exploring that. So hopefully you'll all be here for that. Before giving a reflection on yesterday, I think I did say yesterday that things like this, buildings like this, conferences like this, events like this, processes like this don't just happen. They happen because people do things and make them happen. And I'm a big believer in the old line about the labourer being worthy of his or her hire. And I have been tremendously impressed by this conference. And I would invite you to show your appreciation of the people, if you don't mind, behind the conference. I'll mention them. You have Mac AV and Unit 7, who are responsible for the film coverage and the audio facilities here at the conference. Mourns Caterers, we've all been partaking of their great work outside here. Stakeholder Communications, who have been responsible for the PR surrounding this event. Morrow Communications, the event team, so professional. Katie, Nicola and Karen, they've been brilliant to work with, so attentive to detail, absolutely fantastic. And last but not least, the staff and partners here at Hollywell Trust and the Diverse City Partnership, they've been fantastic. It's been all hands to the pump so far as I can see, and it's paid off, guys, so you can be very, very proud of yourselves. And I want to single out in particular Susan Glass, we're at the back here. Susan is the public face of this entire process in terms of the person that I have been dealing with right throughout, all along at different events and so on, and the connection with this conference. And I have been tremendously impressed. I've been at many conferences. This one just blows me away in terms of just the professionalism which surrounds it. So congratulations to all involved. I think it's a fantastic event. And I think we'll be all the better for it. I will mention one other person. I went home last night, actually at about 1 o'clock, well, not home, I was in bed about 1 o'clock, but I went on Twitter, as I occasionally do. And McPhee had already got up on Twitter coverage of yesterday's event, so it was amazing to see it at that time, and look back. I retweeted it, so anybody who follows me, you can go on to me or follow me on Twitter, and you'll see coverage of the event. It's fantastic, it was up there, it's live, and for anybody who missed anything and wants to digest it in any greater detail, you can do that through Twitter, courtesy of these guys, so well done on that, brilliant to see that happening. I mentioned yesterday as well, but I feel a kind of responsibility as a dairyman to extend a welcome to, Phil, Taya, Giles, Leila, Steve, who've travelled from afar to be with us today. And there's one thing which really, really irritates me, I have to say. They've been staying at the Modern Hotel, and the breakfast there, it's supposed to be a traditional Irish breakfast. I don't know if any of you have heard of this, but what they're actually serving up at breakfast time, it appalls me. It's porridge and cream and whiskey. You know, the idea is absolutely disgusting that anybody would take porridge at that time of the day. You know, it's absolutely shocking, shocking. Although it may help them get through the next couple of minutes here. One person I also want to thank is, as I say, I do this kind of thing frequently at events, and it's great because it means that this big round face becomes kind of very well known in Derry and so on, and you get a lot of people sort of slapping you back if it goes well and so on. But I am one half of Leapfrog Communications. My business partner, Emer, is sitting down here, now cringing. How's your hand up? The reason I'm singling Emer out is because I have copious and thorough notes on yesterday's events. I didn't take them. As you know, I was up here. So I was slabbering on professionally almost, you know. And I was down at a workshop yesterday with Mairead McLean and her father, Paddy Joe, which went brilliantly. So Emer was doing all the hard work. She's the brains in Leapfrog, I'm the mouth. So that's the way our thing kind of works. And as someone once said, behind every man and all of that, there's a woman. She's the one doing all the work, so thanks, Emer. You know. So I will now share with you Emer's notes on yesterday. But I mean, we know how one another thinks, and what she detected or gleaned from yesterday, and I echo this totally. The discussions and reflections were characterised by a positivity and hopefulness that we have seldom, if ever, experienced during a get-together in Derry, and that's genuine. And we talked yesterday. I mean, people might have thought that I was a cynical person. I am not a cynic. I'm a skeptic. And to me, there's a difference, you know. Cynicism is bad. It's negative. Skepticism is good, and especially in the kind of political climate that we live in, it's good to be skeptical. It's good to ask questions. But this event is characterised by positivity and hopefulness and optimism. And the unerring message from the 5 chairs who led us through the day was that maintaining hope, regardless of our circumstances, whatever crises we face, whatever horrors our community, any community is enduring or has endured, hope is a way to move forward. And London Derry is already firmly set on that path. I think we can all detect that mood at this conference. It's hardly surprising that the tone of the day was set by the inspirational words of Eamon Dean, the relentless optimist and chair of the Hollywell Trust. Eamon didn't shy away from this city's ongoing problems, and I was glad to hear you doing that, Eamon. You acknowledged that the city was still far short of getting its fair share, its fair allocation of resources. Anybody who lives here, anybody who's familiar with our economy and our infrastructure and so on will echo that sentiment, but it's good to hear it restated on a platform like this. But Eamon told us that hope was the unbelievable resource that this city does have. And he said that if Derry had continued with the crippling introspection that characterised this city up until the early 90s, we'd still be eating each other alive. Instead, here we are, reimagining ourselves, applying hope pragmatically to develop new projects, shining new light out of old gates. Great kind of an image to use. We found out that in their different ways, our chairs of learning all believe that people who have suffered need to tell their stories. That was a theme that recurred throughout yesterday, and that these stories need to be listened to. Storytelling is one part of the dynamic. The important part is the hearing, the listening, opening yourself up to somebody else's experience, somebody else's words. Giles, who tells stories through his pictures, believes that it's through our darkest times that we gain knowledge, strength and fortitude. Travelling the world, seeing the worst of what human beings can do to each other has also shown him, incredibly, the best of humanity at work. He spoke about storytelling, that idea. He's part of a tradition, sitting around a campfire, going way back hundreds, thousands of years, part of that tradition. In his case, he embraces that in a modern way, using pictures as a mirror, taking a story, holding its integrity, passing it on like a beacon for others to use. One of his most memorable remarks from yesterday, he said he harboured, this was an amazing disclosure, and I just feel so humble having heard it. He harboured no anger towards the people who left the improvised explosive device which caused his injuries. He said he was injured by hatred and ignorance, not by people. Taya uses theatre to bring people together and to tell their stories. It's testimonial theatre, testimony of participation and transformation. She pursues, you'll remember some of the phrases she used yesterday. She pursues what she calls the medicine of the story, a place of accountability, holiness, transformation. She likes to work with people who are initially reluctant to share their story. It's almost the flip side of how I, as a journalist, would have worked. She likes to work with people who are reluctant to share their story. It's about being together in the soup. Taya told us. She stressed the importance of remembering the hurt that's been endured and then seeing the gift that is in that hurt, echoing what Giles said about gaining strength in our darkest times so we can move beyond it. And this is why I think they're here. Taya is optimistic about Derry's future because of the energy here to grab life. Leila, as always, it's great to see her in a dress or a frock today, I think, you know. Leila, as always, inspired us with her positivity and her humour. She made us laugh, but she encouraged us to believe that small individual actions, proactive stories of humanity, will eventually lead to change. Everything is temporary. The elastic finally snaps, she told us. Once again, that message we kept hearing throughout the day. How can I turn this crisis into an opportunity? Leila has done that in a sense in her personal life. And she's such an inspirational figure, and she's doing it in her work as well. Leila stressed our interconnectedness, the need to reach into the deepest cave in people, warned against the damage done by introspection, how easy it is to be narcissistic and inward looking when suffering or living under occupation, for example. The need to reach out into the world and find connectedness. Like Taya, Leila was enthusiastic about the love, the compassion, the humour she has encountered in this city. She believes that if Northern Ireland can be at the point where it is today, anywhere else in the world can do likewise. And that's, you know, Eamon talked yesterday about the learning which can come from this event and from this place. I remember Bill Clinton standing in the Guildhall Square talking about this place being seen or regarded as an example to the rest of the world, a place not of despair, but of hope and of inspiration. Again, that's what we're about, hope beyond hurt. Steve told us he's seen significant changes in people he's worked with by once again working through storytelling. So important, a recurring theme. Helping them to find hope and then digging deeper. He talked about Derry being special. We don't think of it, we don't see it, we don't see the wood for the trees maybe, but Steve, the Texan, he sees Derry as being a special place. He said that people here were open to talking about what happened in the past. They want, though, to move forward. They're welcoming to people from outside. Again, back to Leila's connectedness. Steve told us that unity comes out of a lot of pain. Living stories can change communities. And echoing Leila again, he said he worked to change one person at a time rather than an entire community. But by doing that, change on a bigger scale can happen quickly. He told us that he believed everybody could find hope, but that courage, I don't know if you remember this, courage was harder to find, but it's that courage which motivates people to change. I would say it's that courage, and people like that, that's where you find real and genuine leadership. Last but by no means least, Phil repeated the message of connectedness, of encouraging people to work together and overcome amnesia about the past. Talked about this business of his working with these European cities and this kind of a network and the importance of that. And it's great to see Brent McMenamin here from the City Council, because, or the new District Council, I should say, because I know it's a thing close to Brenton's heart. It's something he's been working towards over a period of years, and it's a process I think that everybody in this room could and should be supportive of. So when politicians come knocking on doors over the next few weeks or whatever, maybe impress upon them the need for us to become part of that network. Phil talked about the privilege of the outsider, which was an interesting way of looking at it. The ability that an outsider, someone who is not party to a problem, has the privilege they have to ask what he called the silly or gauche questions. For example, why do you do that here? Why do you behave in that way? He mentions something that we in Northern Ireland are very familiar with, the choreography of avoidance. I thought it was a wonderful phrase, the choreography of avoidance, where we follow a set of people, we follow routines, We adhere to traditions. We go down particular tracks, and as a consequence of that, we fall deeper and deeper into those tracks, into those trenches almost, and it becomes more and more difficult to encounter strangers. And strangers doesn't mean people from afar necessarily. Strangers can be people from different communities. We become afraid, Phil says, to reach out. Afraid in case we say something wrong, afraid in case we cause offence. So it's easier to say and do nothing. But each time we do that, Phil told us, a bit of humanity dies. And another interesting observation he brought to it was he told us that the hardest people to work with are the people who have no hope. And you tend to think at the people of at the bottom of the rung, in a sense. But experience has shown him that sometimes it's the most privileged people high up in organisations, who suffer most from what he called hollowness and lack of hope. Those were in summary, I think, the distilled wisdom that the 5 chairs of learning brought to day 1 of the conference. As I say now, they've been out and about in the community, doing their workshops, teaching, hopefully learning. They're back with us today for this part of day 2 of the Hope Beyond Hurt conference. I'm going to remind you to do something, by the way, if you don't mind, anybody who has their mobile phone on at the minute, switch it to silent if you don't mind, because I forgot to do it myself. It's now in silent. And tweet about this event, by all means, at Garden of Reflection on Twitter. Tweet at Garden of Reflection and use the hashtag Hope Beyond Hurt if you're doing so. Could I now invite the 5 chairs of learning to join me on the stage here? If you don't mind, I'll move this cup of coffee out of the road here. And I'll look around to Susan. Steve, I think Steve and Phil over this side, is it Susan, or Giles, or? What are you looking for? Steve, do you mind if you go over this, if you don't mind, sorry, if you don't mind. Phil, if you come up here on this side. And Giles, could I ask you to, I mean, terribly awkward here. Can you come over this side if you don't mind? And Tia and Leila, I'll do you want to grab my hand? And it's a big step here. Okay, up we go. Excellent. We're up. You're on terra firma. And there's some water here. If you come around, if you just sit down there, Leila, now. There's some water if you. Leila, you got water, great. Right, these are the 5 chairs. You've seen them and heard from them yesterday. Leila, Achan. Well, I'll go from across the board. We have Tia, Leila, Steve, Giles, and Phil. You're all very welcome. Yesterday it kind of followed a very predictable pattern where I was almost doing it question by question and then back to the start again. But I'd like to open the discussion out to all of you if you don't mind. You were out in the community yesterday, teaching, as I said, and hopefully learning. What did you get from the workshops? How did you find the experience yourselves? Anybody? Any of the 5? Someone needs to talk here. That's part of the deal. Giles, how did you get on?
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the things that I've been thinking about since I've been here. Obviously, I was talking yesterday about my own personal story, but I increasingly really? I'm talking.
Do you know what?
I'm putting it off. It's embarrassing to be blind.
It's always the Palestinians, isn't it? Always the Palestinians.
It's not all about you today. We decided we're doing a marathon together, actually.
It's off now, sorry about that.
Now, one of the things that I'm kind of increasingly seeing when I work with communities affected by conflict is the connection between people and community. And I mean, I know that sounds a very obvious thing, but what I mean by that is, to go on a slight tangent, I love beekeeping.
You're an apiarist?
I am. Yeah, don't tell everyone. But I love beekeeping, and one of the things that I was always fascinated about with hives is that you could have 5 hives together, all in exactly the same place, and each one has a completely different character. And you kind of think these bees are all the same, and when you see a bee, it doesn't really have a character. But as a hive, it does. And you could tell some hives would be in a better mood than the other ones. They kind of have a different pitch, depending on what mood they're in. Some would react differently to if you were smoking it. Some produce more honey, but they actually had, and you always say, well, that's a grumpy hive, or that's a happy hive. And that's because as they came together, they create a community, and that community has its own character. And I believe that that's true with people as well. We all have our individual characters, but that character is reflected in the community. And I think sometimes we almost have to look at communities as a character, to have its own characteristics, and to be treated in that way. So with my own personal experience, I've used some of the bad things that have happened to me to grow, have made me a stronger person, I'm more focused, and all those things. And I think you can take those lessons and put them into a character of a community as well. I think communities can suffer from PTSD. I think there's this kind of collective mind as well as the individual. And the well-being of the individual is as linked to the community as the well-being of the community is linked to the individuals. And so we have to work on the well-being of each person, and through that we work on the well-being of the community.
What do you do though with, you can't, you might have your individual hives and so on, but communities are different. You'll have communities. We have a community in this city, but there's difference within that community. It's not as if everybody is exactly the same, that they think the same way,
of course,
they agree on everything.
But that's what I'm saying though, is the key, I think first, is the well-being of the individuals within that community, and then that becomes reflected as the community. But it has to be thought of in both ways. You have to think about the community and you have to think about the individual.
That sparks me thinking in a different way what we did yesterday and what I've done this week. So what I did on Monday, as I explained yesterday, is I met with 5 different groups of young people from 3 schools and two different communities, a real cross-section of youth. And we read the results of that. We read the very short stories of students and what they're experiencing. And we saw both the difference and the similarities in those hives, but we also saw the name of this conference. We saw hurt and hope, and we really started at the hurt. We started by reading the what young people were experiencing in school in terms of verbal bias, about sexual orientation, about body size, about race, about religion, about disability. And we then talked about the same issues with in the community with violence relating to sectarian differences. And those were the experiences. We then moved on to the hurt. And I want to read one of the statements a student made. This was actually not from Monday, it was from one of the last times I was here. The question I asked was simply write about how issues of bias, prejudice affect you. And this was written by a girl from this community who, besides having a lot of hurt, is, as you will see, a beautiful writer. She had about 4 minutes to write this. I know how much it hurts. I know the feeling of the horrible black thick cloud of despair. I understand the need to hide and be safe. People hurl insults at you all day long, but you won't say anything because you think someone else is always worse off. The silence intensifies into all you can hear is the nasty words and the quickening of your heart. All you can feel is the longing to unburden yourself, to be away somewhere where you don't have to deal with it. Whether or not that place is death is unclear because no one knows your story, my story. We then talked about what I heard from the young people about when they are outside of their neighborhood and outside of their school, what were they experiencing in Derry and Londonderry? And in one school of the 23 students in a focus group, 19 said that they are scared when they are walking in Derry and Londonderry. In a group of 5 boys at a youth center, I asked, well, tell me what you feel, and somebody said, well, it's scary, we think we could get hurt, and Somebody else said, yeah, we might get roughed up. And the oldest of the boys, who was 17 there, and one who was projecting some leadership, but also some sort of macho behavior, he sort of, voice became lower, and he said, what I fear from the risk of sectarian violence, he didn't quite say it that way, but here's the word he said, I fear death. And every one of the other boys in the room said, I am scared that I might die. And so we went to the herd, and I then ended by asking students to write about their hopes and dreams 5 years from now for Derry, Londonderry, and Northern Ireland about sectarian issues. And I want to read you a couple of things they wrote. And we now have probably 100 of these from all the students I've met with this week. I hope everybody can live in peace and not care about religion anymore. And no one cares what color of skin people are. And also, if anybody hears any racist language, to stop it. I would like to see no conflict between Catholic and Protestants, and everyone getting along and being comfortable with their religion. In 5 years' time, I hope there will be no sectarianism, and there will be no stereotyping. I also hope that there will be no bullying or conflict, and it will be a better place for people of all religions. I hope that in 5 years, sectarianism will no longer be a problem, as there has never been a real reason for it, and we do not need to have it. So if everyone was to get over whatever problem they have with someone else, and Derry, Londonderry can be a happy, loving city like we all want it to be, as we are all equal no matter what. And when I thought about this coming into today, and really sparked also by you talking about what separates people and what's different, if all I did was listen to the students without knowing what religion they were from, there's a lot of hurt and a lot of fear, but every single one of them shares the same hope. And that's the resource this community is, not but it is a huge resource this community has. You've got a group of young people who simply want, not simple to get, but they have a very simple hope. The hope is that as a community, everybody can move beyond it. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thought to have.
Steve, which emotion or which feeling comes out top when you have that experience of talking to those young people? Are you sort of left more feeling despair at the fear which they express, or are you buoyed by the hope which they sort of which they have, and the good things and good places which they aspire to?
It's an excellent question, because I work in communities across Europe and across the United States where there's hurt. So I'm used to. But I also work in places where I ask about hopes and dreams, and they put their pens down. And sometimes they get angry at me for asking the question. Not everywhere just the students simply say, "Oh, we want everything to get better." This was very specific dreams on their part. So what differentiates this community from other communities is two things. In terms of the young people, is their hope. And in terms of everybody, there are so many people working to make those hopes and dreams come to fruition that I think it's going to happen. And in some ways, it has to happen for these young people, because if it doesn't happen, their alienation and their hurt is going to, at some point, overwhelm their optimism. But let's treasure that tremendous hopeful energy that they have.
If anything would probably overcome that optimism and crush that optimism, it might be the adults among us, the older ones among us. Leila, you talked yesterday about that idea of young people sort of being agents of change, if I could put it that way. I know I have it at home. I mean, there was a very successful kind of thing done in schools here, I think, and to give them credit. I have two children who are appalled that I smoke cigarettes, who lecture me constantly about it, and who thankfully would not entertain the idea of smoking cigarettes. But the fact that they, my wife has now stopped smoking as well, you know, the fact that they chip away and nag away and give us as adults a hard time about it, it shows that, you know, that change can be affected from not from the bottom up, but from the young up. But do we, is that putting too much pressure on young people in our community?
Are you guys awake?
They were when I started the question.
I think for young people it's important to give space and acceptance and not, what do you call it? And not smother them, not choke them with what we call love. And as I mentioned, I forgot to who, I had a workshop recently with 120 men in Palestine. And one of the main takeaways was, we don't have to inherit everything from our parents. You see, his kids didn't inherit his smoking. Thank God. So I think to love them unconditionally and give them the space really is very important. And I think it must be an omen. I thought I'll share with you something. Yesterday I had this phone call. This guy discovered I have vibrates. I'm new to this technology, and he called me. And he's a guy I helped around 5 years ago. He's an Iraqi guy, and kind of Jail. I've been thinking of Jail a lot. How someone can go through this amazing hurt and stay beautiful like Jail is. And this guy was 20 when an explosion exploded in his face in Iraq when he was playing volleyball. And he lost his sight and he lost his face literally. I mean, they had to repair a face for him, and his nose and his everything. And I remember when I first met this guy, he came to the center where I was doing work. The cleaner said, Layla, I will not bring him tea. I said, why not? And she's very submissive, usually. She said, I'm scared to look at his face. And I thought, God, what future is this guy going to have? But he was so like a child, optimistic and smiling and searching and you know, looking for people who can give him hope. And anyway, so I must have met twice with him, I think. I visited him once at the hospital where he was going to do his, God knows, maybe 30th or more surgery, right? Familiar child. And he was still like a child, laughing and smiling and playful. And I put a bit of a word for him to go to the States, I have to admit, because going to Iraq where it's still unstable and where I know at this point he won't find opportunities there, I put a word for him to be a priority to go to the US. So he called me from there, and he was speaking English. He knew no words of English in 210. I was speaking Arabic, and he was insisting to speak perfect English. And he was calling to tell me, Layla, I'm calling you to tell you, I have a girlfriend, and I'm going to study psychology, and I'm doing workshops and speaking in the communities. And it's really beautiful, like for someone who many people when they first met said, oh my God, you know, me being blind, it was a privilege because it didn't matter really how he looked like. I saw his soul. I connected to his soul really. And that's where I tried to push as much as I could to push an opportunity for this guy. And it's so clear, it's like really, it's contagious. I can see this guy in America even, the so-called land of opportunities, will be really spreading a lot of optimism. And last I will share with you, I was reading something for a Sufi teacher, and he was speaking about how most of us move away from our authentic souls. He said the definition of who we really are authentically is so elusive, but it's something you can feel. And he said you can feel it in the eyes of a baby, where there's some light coming out of it, and most of us move away from it. We go to some kind of defined or designed structure for us, where there's politics, religion, even school conditioning, I think takes us away from this kind of beautiful, authentic selves we have. And this, when we meet a person and define them by personality or by, you know, the role they do, or by the political party or religious party they come from, we don't really meet a person. And we wind up really losing the point. And he said it's like moving away from your heartbeats. I found it so beautiful. And in most of our world, I think we do move away from our heartbeats. And I wish for us to truly go back to our authentic self. And he said this simple breathing we have, it takes no complications. It organizes itself. Breathe in is going inward, feeling yourself. Breathe out is reaching out to the world. And this is happening without any complication. So why do we complicate with all these superficial, whether they're mosque or church rituals or political talks or whatever have you? And these two things yesterday were omens that answered my questions. I was feeling, what the hell am I spreading optimism? Do I really? Isn't it becoming a bit too much, just like porridge in the morning, maybe? With whiskey. Without whiskey.
Yeah. The porridge wasn't the problem, Leila.
No. Whiskey was the problem?
It was stuff you added to it. Tia, it is, I'm interested in what Leila says, and Jay's experience as well of going to places where we've seen the worst of man's inhumanity, and places that you would think would sort of leave you feeling despair, but he can find hope in places like that. What grounds do we have for optimism here in this community? What kind of opportunities are there for us as a community or as people?
I want to really riff off of what Leila said, because it
That's the idea. We want you to spark off one another.
Yeah, it struck me so deeply and profoundly. One of the last projects that I did here before I left last June was to work at the Wave Trauma Center with a group of men, and I shouldn't say a group of men, I should say men who didn't want to meet in a group, who were experiencing huge trauma, sometimes 30 or 40 years later. These were the people that were really invisible. Like, I feel like, I've worked with wonderful people in Northern Ireland who have had some visibility, but these people hide in the crevices. There was a man who lived, he said I think it was 8 years he spent in a cottage where nobody knew, he spoke to nobody. He slept with a shotgun on his lap in his car every night. All he did was cry. He just cried all the time. He was trying to find justice for his brother, and he couldn't find justice anywhere. There was another man, I played an excerpt of this when I gave my closing talk last year, who said, they say that there's a peace agreement and that the war ended, but there's a war in my bedroom every night. I hear the sounds of helicopters. I see the bullet wounds go up from the radiator, and he slept with a sledgehammer under his bed. And all of these men said they didn't want to meet in a group because they were too embarrassed, ashamed, they didn't trust each other, they got too nervous being in a group. And I found I would come away each meeting filled with their presence, with their beauty, with their heartbeats. It was like they were beyond roles. They had fallen out of roles. They were not functioning in normative society. But their generosity of sharing what was real for them was such a relief to hear somebody talk about that level of despair, that level of feeling forgotten, that level of wanting to find a reason to live, wanting to find people to hold on to, was so beautiful. So we ended up making an audio tape of each of them, and most of them couldn't memorize the lines. It was really hard. And I think at this point, when we brought them together to listen to each other's stories, it was the first time they let themselves be in a room and hear each other's stories, and I think they were then maybe ready. So there was something about meeting them where they were, not having them have to be anything different than where they were, which was in utter despair, and not having even the goal that they could meet as a group. But I think now they could. I have this great desire that could happen, and that these would be actually extraordinary stories of hope, because these men get up every day. They get up every day, and that to me is extraordinary. And I don't think most of us would look at them as the stories of hope. I think we would be looking for the next generation or the ones that are making it. But I guess I'm very interested in the ones that only have their heartbeats and broken hearts and still want to find a reason.
Do they change for the better as a result of this experience or this exchange or this exposure, or however you want to describe it?
I think those of us who heard their stories change for the better.
Yeah.
I think that all of this work is about presence, and it's about being present to each other and to ourselves at the same time. So I think that any encounter that's genuine, that's, as Giles was talking in his talk yesterday about, all these incredible beings that he's met, those moments are precious, and that's all that really matters in the real scheme of things, is how can we love each other? How can we be present to each other in the fullness of what it is, even when it seems horrible? That's the beauty to me.
Okay, thanks for that, Tia. Phil, you're a man. You work on a European level. First of all, you work with governments and international organisations and so on. You work at city level. When we try to, get to the better place we talked about yesterday, when we try to, realise the hope that lies beyond the hurt, we don't forget the hurt. I think that's the idea. But we try and move our community or our society to a better place. Does that happen, or can it be made to happen? How does that actually come about?
Yeah, there's often a danger, and I find particularly amongst the English that we say, well, let's not talk
Everybody in
about
this
it.
room probably just nodded their head
Yeah.
there.
Let's not talk about it. Let's just have a cup of tea and everything will sort itself out. Well, it doesn't, actually. And there is a definite need for policy, for practice, for competence, for knowledge and for sharing of skills. And I make no apologies for that. There is a need to act. That doesn't mean that we all have to sit back and say, the state should do something about this. There is a need for us all to take a responsibility, more than ever now, given that the state has shrunk. But we talked quite a lot about leadership yesterday, and where that leadership comes from in these unsettling times that we live through, and that there are times when a remarkable leader will come from the centre, from conventional places through politics, and we always live in hope, don't we, that we're going to get great leaders coming through our democratic structures. But if that's the only place that we're looking, then a lot of us are going to be disappointed, I think, because that system isn't producing enough of the kind of leaders that we need, and we need to be prepared to find leaders in other places. And to be a leader, to be an intercultural innovator in conditions like this is not an easy place to be, because it's to put oneself into the middle, into the void between two or more different groups who don't see eye to eye, puts oneself at the risk of being shunned by all of them, actually. So it can be a very lonely place to stand in the middle and say, I can bring you together. And I can understand why we don't find many people with the courage to put themselves in that place. We talked yesterday, and I gave some examples from around Europe, from the former Yugoslavia, where often it takes the outsider, the most shunned, often the most despised or ridiculed of outsiders. Only they can sometimes see the wood for the trees. Where I talked to a great example of a Muslim Romani community, who are the absolute lowest of the low within a divided community, and the community was falling apart because nobody could get their act together to do even the basic things like empty the bins and fix the roads. And it took the wisdom, I think, and the foresight and the vision from the outside of that most shunned of outsiders, the Muslim Romanis, to actually say, you're all mad, we're all crazy, we're all going to hell in a handcart together, but none of you can see that. None of you can climb off your little pedestal to admit that. So if you won't do it, we will. And I won't tell the whole story, but it was a story of how, from the most basic and mundane thing of fixing a road one weekend, they actually rebuilt some sense of common purpose in that place. And I think we talked a lot about the difference between gatekeepers and bridge builders. And often if we're asked to maybe name leaders in our community, we might, the faces or the voices that might spring immediately to mind are the gatekeepers, are the people who regulate a particular group or community and decide who is in, who is out, what happens. And those people, we know them because they shout the loudest, they're in our face. But who are the bridge builders in our community? They're not always the obvious people. They're not the people who are looking for our attention. They're silently getting on. Sometimes they're not people that we might automatically want to be with. They might be slightly awkward, slightly gauche, but silently, they're the people who are brick by brick putting together those bridges that we need. Think about it. Think, who are those people in your community? I suspect we have a room full of them today.
Tell us this, you talked about people talking about leadership at the workshop yesterday. Are they looking to others for leadership, or did you get any sense that the people at the workshop maybe consider themselves as becoming leaders?
I hope they do, because as I said, if it's a vain hope if we simply are sitting waiting for leaders. We need to find leadership in ourselves. We need in a community, even Leafield, Chantella that we went to yesterday. You know, we need 100 leaders in a place like that, people who are prepared to stand up. Some of them may blossom and then go back into the community. Others may become lifelong leaders. That doesn't matter to me. It's giving up people that sense that they have something to give, and that leadership has been very defined in communities like Northern Ireland. There's a certain model. Yeah, there is, and maybe it comes from the church, that sense of the man who, the preacher who speaks the gospel, has rather defined our image of what a leader should be and what a leader should do. And we still need that particular character. We always will, but let's hear from the others. Let's hear from the quiet people as well, who can lead in a quiet way.
Could I ask any of the five of you to address this? Phil talks about this idea of the gatekeepers, and they're often the people who shout the loudest. They can often be quite overbearing people. They're often people with tremendous power in our communities, and it's difficult to stand up to people like that and speak to them and confront them and challenge them and to move against them. So how do we at community level address that particular problem? I'm going to let the silence linger here. Anybody, any ideas on that?
I think sometimes you need those gatekeepers, but not always. I mean, there are grassroots movements. There are young people who start taking. Part of it depends on what level of change you want to make. If you want to make a change that requires you to talk to the elected representatives and get a new law, there are lots of gates. If you are trying to make a neighborhood safer or to make young people feel included, that can be done starting with a small group of people. And when people, whether they're young people or they're older people, start experiencing success in change at smaller levels, then they start accumulating both experience and some power to be able to deal with the more institutional gates that you're talking about.
Do you know what? It's interesting. Like you, Steve. I mean, I have had the privilege of you know, being at a lot of events over the last couple of years, particular events at which young people from local schools were brought face to face with politicians who supposedly represent the young people and who do exercise tremendous power over the young people's lives. And I do have to say that the sense, the vision, the optimism and so on that I detected from the young people in the many different places where this happened. It happened here in this city, it happened in Omagh, it happened in Newry, it happened in Belfast, it happened in Ballymena. And it was almost as if you were speaking to or hearing from two entirely different species. The young people, they were so much more progressive, so much more enlightened, so much more optimistic. And the difficulty seemed to be coming from the top down, from the old to the young, from the people who had the power. So how do you change that?
But while that's going on, there's change being made. That there are programs between cross-community programs going on where students are making change in their own attitudes. At some point, those young people are going to be the ones who are going to be holding the key to those gates. And they're going to be different people. So,
but do they not are they not themselves changed? Because it seems that historically here almost as if maybe that there always were young people who were optimistic and who were enlightened and who were civilized, I'll use the word in quotes, and they become the adults then of the next generation, and they seem to inherit the same old beliefs and to carry on the same old practices.
you know, I started 20 years ago a program that's ended up being in 300 schools in my state, and it was getting young people to start trying to address not only issues of bias and prejudice and harassment in their schools, but also in their communities. And then when I started teaching at university, both undergraduates and graduate students, I was meeting people who had been in that program 20 years ago. I mean, they were now in their mid-30s. They had become engaged adults, engaged in trying to make their communities work. And it's invisible. I mean, but it's incredibly powerful. I don't think these students, these young people, leave this behind. I'm not saying that all of them keep on going, but if you've learned that you can make a difference within your youth culture, and you've also learned that it's given you confidence, and it's created in you a level of empathy about issues of how people treat each other, and you start taking that into the community. There's change being made. There's change being made in ways also that are invisible, because people, not everybody who comes out of this is going to end up being a leader that's on the front page of a newspaper. Some will be, but but I think it's a theory of change, and I've seen it work.
Leda, you going to say something there?
Yeah. Although I'm tempted to ask you to make everyone sing in the next few minutes, even if it's, I think it's a good idea, but I feel like I view differences. Some genius person who is one of those not in the light told me something. He said the difference between societies who are developed and not developed is not quite developed societies see differences in a pyramidal way. We see it as high and lower and lower. And more developed societies see it in a circle, in a round way. So I see everyone's role as important. The gatekeeper, the silent kind of grandmother like my mom, who plays the role of everybody goes and finds comfort in a hot cup of tea or soup. The person who brings people together to do the work in the garden, etc. They're all really important. And I remember this same workshop that's sitting in my head with men. A couple of men introduced themselves as, I'm just a worker, or I'm just a farmer. I said, nobody is just anything. You are the most important person, because you're a human being. So you are a very important person doing farming or work. So I think it's changing again how we see human beings, right? And I told them in that workshop that even the smallest nail, or what do you call it, in a piece in the airplane is so essential, because if it breaks, the whole airplane is in trouble.
Yeah.
So, you know.
So we all have a role to play, really.
Yeah.
Right. The five of you have come from very different places with very different experiences. And I'll ask you to, and it's picking up on what Phil was saying yesterday, because he did talk about the privilege of the outsider, to ask the silly or ghost question, but of people like us who are here and all practicing, or often practicing, the choreography of avoidance. What about us do we need to change? From your perspective, you've come here as outsiders, you've been among us, worked among us, lived among us at times. What do we need to change about ourselves? What can we change about ourselves?
I think for me,
No, you know what? I'd invite you not to be careful. Be honest. Tell us, what do we need to do? What do we need to change about us?
3 or 4 more vegetarian restaurants.
More vegetarian.
I
Right.
think when I first got here, the thing that struck me, because in one way I go, oh, I don't want to answer that question, because there's so much incredibly wonderful things, and I don't want to talk in generalities. But when I listen to the radio here, I am completely shocked every time, and I listen to it all the time just because I'm shocked, because people literally talk at the same time. Like there's a call-in show, and everybody is talking at the same, at least 2, sometimes 3 people, and nobody is even pretending to listen to each other. I mean, in the U.S., there's usually a pretense that they're listening, and it actually seems like a very global thing that would be okay. The idea that speaking is more important than listening, and yeah, I think that's all.
So less Stephen Nolan, I think.
Yeah.
Very loud applause. Any other observations?
I mean, I travel a lot, and I've been to many places in British cities, Irish Republican cities, and many parts of the former Soviet Union, where solidarity of any kind has drained away, has dissolved. I've walked around housing estates in the Irish Republic and Britain and in Ukraine, and you think there is no glue at all of any kind, of religious, economic, social, it's all gone. And you're really thinking, where does one start? So what you need to change here, but you need to change that with great care, is the fact that you do have solidarity here. You have forms of solidarity, whether it's around nationality or a sense of shared history or religion. Now we know, we're not going to talk about some of the difficulties that has caused, but nevertheless there is solidarity, and there is still care within communities and across generations. Whereas, what I'm looking at across the water in Britain is a silent, hidden catastrophe, particularly affecting the elderly. That we've lost those bonds of care within communities, which I believe probably are still stronger here than south of the border and across the water. And you must handle that with the greatest of care. And in dismantling sectarianism, do not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Hold on, cherish that solidarity that you have, but somehow kind of neutralize it from some of those toxic sectarian aspects.
Jay,
I mean, I would echo the same thing. I mean, you were talking about when I go to a lot of these places that on the outside are terrible places and terrible things happening. How could you find hope in those places? And as I was saying yesterday, the hope I tend to find is in the strength of community, is in the strength of family. And it's definitely something I noticed from my first visit here. And in some ways it is kind of counterintuitive that in some ways it was these very strong identities that caused a lot of the problems here. But at the same time, what really struck me from my first visit was the incredible sense of community here in Derry. And that's something that is incredibly, we should be incredibly proud of. And there is the risk of as you're dismantling some of the negatives of that, you lose the benefits of it. And as I say, you know, I come back to London, and I'll have been in Gaza, and in Gaza everybody's stopping, saying hi, and talking to me, and taking time. And you know, I was walking around some of the villages that were absolutely destroyed only 9 months ago, and it's hard to imagine how bad it was there. Some of the worst things I've ever seen in terms of just destroyed villages, and a lot of families were killed there. And I'm walking around at 6 o'clock in the morning taking photographs, and the biggest problem I had was the caffeine rush from the amount of people that kept coming up to me, offering me a coffee, saying, come and sit with me, have another coffee. And I've had about 10 strong Arabic coffees by then. I'm like, can't really focus on anything. But it was incredible for me because, you know, in some places where you go like that, you have to be very sensitive. It's obviously people have lost lives, villages have been destroyed, and going around taking photographs is a very sensitive issue. But there, every single person came up to me wanting to talk, and it was an incredible sense of community. And then I get back home and I get off the plane in London, you know, and I'm struggling with 2 bags, which is not easy when you've got one hand. And I'm trying to get off the train, and rest of people just pushing by me and things. And London is a place that I was born in, and I was born in South London, and we have a real tradition of community there, but much of that has been lost in the rush towards materialism, capitalism. You know, it's been pushed away. And community is, you know, a place I love, Brixton. The community is completely sort of disintegrated there, right in front of my eyes. And so you have it, and hold on to it, and be proud of it.
Yeah, do you know what? It's one of the sort of strange experiences when you come from this part of the world. It's a fairly natural thing, I think, here, that when we see somebody, even somebody you don't know in the street, you say, how you doing? Yes, hi, whatever, this kind of thing. And Edson, yes, hi is a greeting in Derry. Okay, so that's what it means. Yes, has been struggling with the local idiom here, so it's been a steep learning curve here. But if you do that on a tube station or on a tube train in London, people look at you like, you know, you're
You get reported.
off your head. Exactly, you know, it's that kind of way. And I remember a former colleague of mine in the BBC who was much higher up in the pecking order than I ever got to, but he managed to get tickets to a cricket match at the MCC.
Yeah.
I don't know an awful lot about cricket, but it was there, and it so happened that the Prime Minister, John Major, was there that day as well. He's a big cricket fan. And the BBC guy's son went out to the loo, had to go to the far less well-appointed facilities than they have here to use them. And he walked into the toilet, and the guy he's from South Derry, and he's wearing a Derry GAA shirt, Gaelic football jersey. He walked in the toilet, and the Prime Minister, John Major, was standing using the urinal. And this guy just walks in with a Northern Ireland accent and a GAA shirt on and says, yes, Prime Minister, how you doing? It's a true story. I think John Major thought he had been sent for, you know. His number was up. That's a true story. One positive observation, because we have been talking about we've been talking about community here today, and there's a phrase that we hear used here often, and it's the 2 communities. We talk about the 2 communities. A personal thing that I would love to see happening is that here in this community we don't talk about 2 communities. We talk about the community, a community, one community. That's one thing I'd love to see happening here, just evolving. You know, be brilliant. At this point,
we're talking about the narcissism of small differences, something that Freud said, and I was thinking about, you know, the flags and the painted curbstones, and it would be crude and heavy-handed to march in and say take those down, but what's an alternative? What about cover the whole town in flags of all kinds? What about painting all the curbstones for the next 10 years?
Phil, the problem is paint them what colour? That's what it becomes.
Every colour of the rainbow. Yeah. The other thing is you need a damn good market in this town. Get a market. You've got a beautiful area down outside the Guildhall. Get a wonderful market on there. Why isn't there one?
We do have one periodically, and it happens then again, but it should be a permanent feature. Look, at this point we've demand for more vegetarian restaurants and a market and various other things. Could I invite to the platform now to join us here the chairman of Holywell Diversity Partnership, Eamon Dean, and Helen Quigley, Chief Executive of the Inner City Trust. Helen, I'll stand up, and if you don't mind, you can sit where I was, and I'll move to the side of the stage here. Eamon, I'll begin with you, if you don't mind. I'm just wondering what your expectations of this conference were at the outset, because it was a hugely ambitious thing to undertake, and the whole process is hugely ambitious. And you described it, I think, as the most important thing that you and your colleagues here in this place and in this project have done to date. So, what were you hoping to get out of it, and to what extent has that been achieved or realised?
I think I might have said that it's the most important thing that we've done since 1992, since the previous Beyond Hate conference.
Hate, yeah.
And it was really interesting last night at the dinner. The Deputy First Minister reminded us all of the Beyond Hate conference in 1992 and how that had been instrumental in bringing about the ceasefire of 1994.
Really? He said that?
He
Yeah.
stated that categorically.
Because things were happening politically at that point, obviously.
Well, things were happening, and above all else, what happened at that conference, which some political parties didn't attend because others were going. The DUP didn't go there because Sinn Féin went there. But there was a life underneath the conference, as it were. There were some Americans. Well, there was a guy called Bill Flynn from Mutual of America was there, and outside of the conference, he was making contact with all the representatives of Sinn Féin, and he helped to arrange the visa, the Jerry Adams visa, to visit America, and the influence that the Irish Americans had, and I suppose the power of the money of the Irish Americans in persuading people to call a ceasefire. Martin McGuinness was very, very interesting. He said that he had read that some British generals saying, we can never defeat the IRA. And he said that he had also knew from his own experience that the IRA could never defeat the British Army. He said, why? And none of us can win this thing. Why should we continue? Let's stop it here now. And so the conference, like the Beyond Hate conference, gave that desire, that need, the facility to happen. And I can see the desire, the need for one community, which you expressed, Chair, that this is the next phase, this is the next stage, and it'll not happen tomorrow. But so in terms of achieving stuff from this conference, if we have achieved that we will begin a very, very organised and unpredictable way forward, which allows us to become one community, then I think we've achieved a lot.
Is it an unpredictable way forward, or can people kind of be herded along, shepherded along, nudged along, guided, coaxed, cajoled, whatever it takes, but can we get them to that place of hope? I mean, can that be done? Can it be achieved?
Well, I think we're at the hope. The people here are very hopeful, and that's what I was trying to say yesterday. City of Culture Year showed that clearly. Thousands of people in this town saying, I want to find a way to articulate a way forward which is better for my children, our children's children, and one of the ways, the only way in which we could offer people to do that at the moment is to be on the streets, as it were, during the FLA, and to participate in events. And the mass participation has been immense. Now, there are other potential mass participations that we haven't begun to explore yet, some of which has to do with the lack of resources. People need jobs, people need money. If we had more jobs and more money, you'd have more markets in the city centre, you'd have more vegetarian restaurants. But we simply do not have the money in this community to do lots of things we want to do. So we have a lot of things that we have to do. We have to create jobs, we have to build on the people's desire to have a better society. So
Just be very careful at the next conference then that it isn't called Beyond Hope. Because
No.
that could send out the wrong message.
no,
What's
it'll not be
beyond
beyond hope. There's something like hope realised, what next? Or something. Okay.
Thanks for that. Yeah. I was kind of reminded in the course of all this that in that phase of the political process that became the peace process and so on, that a number of politicians from this part of the world were taken out to South Africa to be exposed to other kind of ways of doing things and other thinking, and the idea was that they become enlightened and freed up and so on. But believe it or not, because of what Eamon's talking about there, that problem of certain people not travelling with certain other people, when they went to South Africa, they organised a visit to, I think it was the very southern tip of South Africa, and I think that they briefly had to reintroduce apartheid on the beaches in South Africa to accommodate the politicians from this part of the world. It was kind of quite extraordinary. Helen, from your perspective, and I mean, we have this Hope Beyond Hurt conference, but we also have the other work happening here, the pull-up banner here, the Garden of Reflection. That is, in your opinion, it's. I think you see it as something that's being as important for this city and for this community as the iconic Peace Bridge that we heard about yesterday. So, what are you hoping that this entire process will lead to?
Well, I think it was something that Leila alluded to earlier. You know, life is a journey, and we're all on it. Some of us are luckier than others. We all come into the world with nothing. We leave it with nothing, and in between. As I say, some of us are luckier than others, and it's for each and every one of us to make a difference. And I think Phil alluded to this. We all need to be personally responsible in what we say, in what we do, how we treat people, and it's respectability. Eamon and I have had quite a few meetings, and we'll see this thematic running through the garden when we eventually get it opened, and the discussions that took place, and our mutual friend Damien, who had great aspirations for the garden, and just the wording, you know, acceptance, tolerance, respect, understanding, and we hope to see that in the garden when it comes, and we hope that the garden will afford people moments just to go in there, be in the presence, as Taya related to, and understand where we are, where we're coming from. And life is very busy for each and every one of us, whether we're working or whether we're not. And we allow sometimes our minds to become crowded. And I think we just need to pause, take that time and reflect gently. We're all guilty of it, Paul. Life is what it is, human nature, human relationships. We're all guilty of being busy and not having time. And I think, Taya, you were referring to it earlier, and how you doing? You know, we're brilliant at that, Edison, in the city. How you doing? And you're rushing past a guy, you're not really asking. And quite often I would say, have you got 3 weeks to listen? I'll tell you how I'm doing. So I think there is a personal responsibility in each and every one of us. I think we're looking forward to the Garden of Reflection. Inner City Trust are more involved in the physical infrastructure and in creating the environment. I think Eamon and his team here have done tremendous work. The city has led in many ways, and it's really about building on that work. And as Eamon has alluded to earlier, the Impact 92 and the impact that it had. And it's not always the big things in life that make an impact, but quite often small things, unassuming. And Leila has alluded to that earlier today, and I think the story she told about the young man that she helped in 2010 is quite powerful. And my dad, Paul, I think we're all blessed and privileged yesterday and today to listen to the 5 chairs speaking, each of them from their own perspective, each of them bringing their own stories. And I find, and I think you can hear it right now, the silence in this room is powerful in itself when people are speaking. I didn't hear anybody getting up, I didn't hear anybody pouring water, I didn't hear any paper movement, and I think it's testament to what this conference has been about.
Well, I suppose the garden that you talk about, I mean, it's a physical, it will be a physical garden, but it's more than that.
Yeah.
It's going to be something else, yeah, in terms of what people bring to it. Giles, yeah?
Can I actually just say something about the Garden of Reflection? But before that, I want to say I learned a great lesson about peace building and negotiation yesterday evening. But I didn't realise how valuable it really was.
You see the sense of anticipation was built up by that laugh. No pressure.
But I was in a,
You're drinking,
we were in a very
huh?
difficult situation yesterday evening after the dinner. There was a group of 5 or 6 of us left at a table with a bottle of wine that wasn't finished. And the bouncers were going around, turning up all the other tables, standing around us, obviously wanting us to get on. And we were trying to work out what we could possibly do. Eamon got up and went off and negotiated for a while and came back and said, I've negotiated 15 minutes. Finished the wine. So yeah, very valuable skills.
It was.
In terms of the Garden of Reflection, I mentioned it when I was here last year. In Kabul, there's a hospital run by the Italian NGO Emergency, and their founder, Gino Strada, has a wonderful philosophy about medical care in developing countries, and that is that any hospital should be built to the same standard that he would build it for his own children. Why, if you're building a hospital in Sudan, would you make it any different than if you were building it in Milan? So one of the key factors is the architecture and the landscaping of gardens around these hospitals. And that's something that, as far as I know, no other really NGO does in those kind of emergency situations. But he feels that it's a holistic approach, that it's not just you go and sew somebody's leg up, it's also the fact that they can then be in this garden. So in Kabul, there is one of his hospitals. And it's a kind of tragic story, really, because it's built in a former kindergarten. And he actually, the hospital set up during Taliban rule, when the Taliban was fighting Northern Alliance. It was the first hospital built by Westerners in there at the time. And they created this beautiful garden. And as I say, the garden has a real pathos to it, because there's also a crater in this garden where a Russian missile had hit when it was still a kindergarten and killed a lot of children. So it was a place of real hurt, a place of real pain in the middle of Kabul. And it's a place where people come from all across the country with terrible injuries brought on by conflict. And yet this garden is this incredible, peaceful place. And I sat there. Kabul is a chaotic, crazy place. It was the first time I'd been back since I'd been blown up, so I was pretty nervous myself, and I kept hiding under things because I thought things were going to blow up. But in that garden, I found peace. And I knew that in that garden, some of those injured men could quite easily have been from the Taliban. There were people from both sides. They have no policy. They take anybody that's injured. But in this garden, everybody was at peace, and it was an incredible experience to sit in the middle of Kabul, in the middle of a war zone, really, and find one of the most peaceful places I've found anywhere in the world. And at a time, I could just sit there all day and just reflect on things and felt incredibly safe. So I know firsthand the value of such a place as that, and a place of tranquility, and a place of balance, and a place where everybody feels welcome and safe.
Yeah, it's good to hear, and we certainly aspire to creating that place here as well.
And it's important to have such a place in the centre of the city.
Yeah, neutral space.
So that this city regards as really so important that we have it at our very heart.
Well, it's the first time that I've done many conferences. It's the first time I've ever heard the phrase used. It's the first time I've been back since I've been blown up. It just dropped in. Jay, quite amazing. Eamon, we talked yesterday about this idea as well. I mean, this place, I would remark to people when I talk to them about this place that this is I find it a very civilizing place. And I mean that in the most genuine, honest, decent, civil kind of a way. And you come in here and everybody gets on so well together, and it's fantastic to come into. But you talked yesterday about this idea of new light coming out of old gates and so on. And it's important that whatever is done in here, I think you and Helen, everybody involved in this project would probably agree that it's important that whatever is done in here, all that whole civilizing experience, that emanates from this place. It goes through those gates and out into the city beyond. Are there grounds for optimism and hope that will happen, or that it is happening?
Yeah, well, I mean, in essence, I suppose what you're saying, the way I hear it is that you can't separate how you do a thing from your desired end result. You can't separate the means from the end. I can't liberate you through the barrel of a gun. You know, what I can do is help to liberate myself and those who I meet by treating people with the utmost respect. And, if each of us does that, then it changes everything. And I think that's, we were talking earlier about responsibility and leadership and forms of leadership. I don't think there's any mystery to leadership. I think for a long, long time, we have been deluded by the notion of a sort of messianic leadership. And, you know, Hume versus Paisley type of thing. You know, Hume representing one side and Paisley the other. Or if it's not, and it's unfair to those two individuals for me to characterize it in that way, but very often, and particularly the media, have characterized it in that way, and then get them fighting and shouting at one another, just not listening to each other. And that's the way in which the communities have been fighting this great fight, or not fighting this, or not listening to one another, and not really beginning to take the leadership that we're talking about, and taking responsibility for how we are, and not treating each other with the utmost respect. I think if we decide that we're going to treat everybody with the utmost respect, it doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter who we are anymore.
Are there grounds for optimism that and I'm interested with Taya's the fact that she noticed this thing, and I mean, I hear it all the time. At times I actually enjoy it for all the wrong reasons, but on our airwaves, people just having a go at one another and not stopping, just trying to talk over one another and shout louder than the other person. And the politicians do that as well, you know, it's quite remarkable. I mean, can we believe that we can get to the point where, you know, where people in the community, we talked about this whole the importance of storytelling, but the most important part of that is the listening, that end of it. Can we get to that point as a community, and can our politicians, our political representatives, get to that point where they, instead of shouting over their political rivals, will actually hear and maybe, hopefully, understand where the other person is coming from?
I think it's already happening. I mean, it's happening behind closed doors, where you're bringing, you know, ex-paramilitaries together and bringing them together with victims. It's been happening at Hollywell. Actually, a lot of this theater of witness work came from, was it called Chicken Soup for the Soul, that Eamon Baker and Eamon Dean helped to create, where it was a safe place here for people to tell their stories. And the quality of listening in that room, I mean, I remember you could hear a pin drop. And I think people are starving for that. And actually, when we first started doing Theater of Witness, I remember with Pauline and Eamon, we would have these meetings afraid of what the audiences might do. People might start shouting. I think we were afraid, we were thinking of the airwaves, somebody might get violent, they may not want to hear this story. And we never had that. In the performances, you know, for 4 years that we toured, people were quiet as church mice. And I think that it's like, you know, be the change that you want to be. So that I think Hollywell represents that, and the Garden of Reflection represents that. If creating it, people come because it's nurturing, because we all want that. I don't think anybody wants to be agitated and crazed and run by fear, and so I have great hope. Great hope.
Fantastic.
I think in terms of listening, there's some things we have to stop listening to. I think we should switch the radio off. We certainly shouldn't listen to the Stephen Nolan show. We certainly, we have to stop feeding ourselves this crap. And stop listening, and they will change.
Okay, sometimes, you know, in fairness, but at times, you know, Stephen Nolan will perform a very valuable function. I don't know, and again, I don't want to be party political, but if anybody would have heard his programme today when he had the UKIP representative here on, the guy was given a fairly difficult run, and his policies were gone through fairly rigorously, I'd put it like that. And I think that perhaps the community may have been done, depending on your political perspective, may have been done a service by that process. But I make that point because Stephen Nolan isn't here to defend himself.
Okay.
And all that.
Okay.
That's the kind of territory they have to inhabit.
Look, well, he characterises a type of radio.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, yeah, sure.
Led by beer man.
Yeah. Look, at this point, we'll draw this part of the conference just to a close, if that's okay. Thanks to all of our chairs of learning. Thanks to Helen and Eamon for joining us. I want you all to stay here for the moment, because there are presentations to be made to each of the chairs, and maybe Helen and Eamon, you will perform
No music?
the ceremony.
No music.
Layla,
Yeah,
why don't
the
you
fanfare.
You have a mic on, Leila.
Fanfare for the
Shooby-dooby-doo.
common man.
Has anybody else been struck by how much Steve sounds like Tony Bennett, by the way? Hey,
No.
you sound exactly. I would love to hear you sing, Steve.
Come on.
I'll just
No,
explain.
you wouldn't.
I left my heart in Stanford.
Sure, I'll do the shooby-dooby-doo. Just to explain that these artworks, they have been created by Suzanne Woods, and just to explain what they involve here. Suzanne was saying that in creating the designs for the various chairs of learning, her research led her to symbols that are universally used to indicate the concepts of community and inclusion. Again, this just speaks to what this conference is about. The main motif in all the works is taken from an Aboriginal design of pathways leading to a central location in which diverse people can come together and communicate their stories, and the people within the circles extend their arms to each other in celebration. So it is extremely, very much, it chimes with what the whole ambition for the Garden of Reflection and that process is all about. So that's just to explain put the actual artworks in context. Okay, do you want to? Yeah. Great. Do you want to bring them up? Do you want to, or? Sure.
Susan, you present them.
Well, there you are, Susan.
Good idea. Oh my
Do you want a microphone for it? I'll hold this here. Giles, you'll have to show us how to hold two things with one arm.
Just because this is the first one I have in my hand.
Yeah.
It's for Layla.
Ah.
And they're actually cushions, if you can see them. I feel like, you know, on the Generation Game or something. Just don't fall off, Paul, please. So this, you can get a little look at them at lunchtime or whatever. The first one I'm going to give is for Layla, and what Suzanne has put. It's not just a commission, an art commission. You know, she did put a lot of thought. We gave her information on each of our chairs, and she put a lot of thought into how each of them were going to look. So this one, she said, chair of insightful healing.
Yeah, you need sight to see it.
Yeah.
Yes, Layla, I do. I've used the spiral as a central motif to suggest a central core that expands outward. In this, I am illustrating the fundamental concepts that everyone needs to feel connected to the communities and have access to its resources in order to flourish. So listen, this is for Layla.
Lovely.
And again, because obviously Layla is blind, as you know, in case nobody noticed, this one actually hasn't got any glass on it, Layla, so there's texture and you can actually feel it. So if you just put your hands there.
Oh,
And it's purple, which is one of your favourite colours, and you look well in purple.
thank you.
I didn't tell her that, she just, you know, that's what she did.
Thank you so much.
So you're very welcome. So that's Layla. Thank you. This one is for Taya. Go. Just, I'll walk to the other end. Where you're at. Taya.
Oh wow.
And it says, the most compelling aspect of this project for me is that diverse individuals come together to tell their stories and thereby not only learn from each other but lighten their own loads through shared experience. So, Taya, that's you.
Thank you so much.
This one is for Giles. Again, 2 hands, Giles. I'm
Yeah.
not doing very well here. This is for you.
Beautiful.
I'll just give everybody a wee look here first. And Suzanne has said, I created this work in shades of black and white in order to complement Giles Dooley's photography. His use of black and white conveys a universality to his subjects, and also is reminiscent to me of Picasso's Guernica, another immensely powerful image created to commemorate victims of conflict. So that's for you, Giles.
Well done.
And Steve, we have yours next. And there you go, you can see. So they've all got a really nice common theme, and we were very lucky. We do have we have Marco Pagachnik coming now in May, our Secretary of Learning. So we actually have copies of these, so they will be exhibited at some point in the next few weeks, hopefully. And Steve, Chair of Unity. This illustrates that those on various paths converge in a central neutral space. Those engaged in conflict resolution, education, training and advocacy provide a space underpinned by the promotion of human rights and the prevention of bias. There you go. And last but not least, Phil, this one's for you. Here we go. And Suzanne has said, in this work, I wanted to suggest the concept of that the concept of interculturalism allows diverse individuals to retain their identities while coming together to communicate their knowledge and experience.
Very good.
I have one more as well. And I know you'll all join with me in saying that Mr. McFadden, you've done the most amazing job over the last few days, I have to say. It's just been, you know, above and beyond. It's been a real privilege watching you work. This man has put an awful serious amount of work in the background. He's done his homework, and I know, and Emer as well also. I know you're definitely the woman behind the man.
You know what? Give it to Emer. Emer's done the homework, not me.
I know you guys have a space. You know, you have your own office, so this will hang nicely in your office. So, you know, it's a real privilege, you know, and Paul and Emer really get us, and I know you can, you know, for the last 2 days, you know, they do really get us, and they've, you know, Paul, you managed to pull everything together so well on stage, keeping the conversation going. It's all very, you know, and it's all very seamless, and you make it look so easy, and it's a real privilege to work with you, and we really want to thank you very much, and Emer as well. So I'll have to come and see it hanging in your office. Okay, six months each.
We'll rent you out office space.
You're lovely, thank you, Susan, and you're very, very generous in what you're saying. I am very good at doing what I'm told. That's what I do. God rest my ma. My ma was one of the most influential, probably the most influential person in my life. She's dead 10 years, but she used to work. My dad's still alive. He's 86 years of age, and the way it worked in our house was if it was cold at night, my mother would say to my dad, "It's cold. Put a jumper on you," and he put a jumper on him. And that's the way it has worked in our house. And that's what I do. So Emer does all the work, and I come in, and as I said earlier on, and I'm not joking about this, I'm the mouth at the end of it, but that's the brain over there. So thanks a million for that. Look, lunch is going to be served at 1:45. We've allowed a bit of time for me to provide what is described as a roundup of the conference in this year. But do you know what's most important that we hear from you? Maybe briefly with observations. Briefly, please, because it'll be nice to hear what a number of you have made of the conference, maybe in terms of your expectations, maybe in terms of how you have been changed as a result, maybe what you've got from the various chairs of learning. So anybody wants to share anything with us? Yes, at the very back. If you don't mind, maybe giving those who are comfortable doing it, maybe give your name.
Yeah, my name is Harris. I work in the relations capacity for Gulf Coast and Towns Council, but just something that you said.
You're very welcome to this part of the world, but all the way from beautiful part of the world.
It is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Just something that you said earlier on about the youth making a difference. 47 years ago this week, my mother and father got married from 2 different communities. We were totally shunned by both communities, both sets of relatives wouldn't go to the wedding, wouldn't do anything, but we just kept working away and kept hoping and kept believing. Reared us within the 2 communities, again very quietly, not above the radar, just worked away, reared us to show tolerance and love to everybody. And as such now we are doing the same with our children, so hope really is a good thing there. My grandmother on my mother's side didn't call my father's name until the very day she died, about 4 hours before she died. And I said, see, she always liked me. Humour was there, and it was plucked away, so the people and the youth make the difference. They're only 16 and 19 when they got married, and 47 years later, through all of that, through their children getting stolen, through windows getting put in, they stay together, so the hope's definitely there.
Thanks. I have a brother who's a journalist as well, Mark. He's a television journalist with UTV. He comes from the ugly side of the family here. Mark's my brother, yeah. I always say he's from the ugly side of the family. He's tall with hair, you know. But he got to play golf actually one day with the parents of two major winning golfers from your part of the world, Graham McDowell and Darren Clark, their fathers, Kenny and Godfrey. And Mark was telling us that at the last hole there was, it must have been a wee wager, some money riding on it or something like that. But it was Kenny, who I think is Graham's father, who had a very, very, very long putt on a difficult green. I think it was at Portrush, Royal Portrush Golf Course. And Godfrey was standing holding the flag for him, and Mark was looking at this and saying, God, the pressure's on now to get this in. And Godfrey said, well, you know what pressure makes? Diamonds. And Kenny sank the putt from about 30 or 40 feet away and put it down, so it was absolutely brilliant. But Graham McDowell, also the product of a marriage between a Catholic and a Protestant, and has come out of it. He's a brilliant, brilliant guy with a great personality, so fantastic guy. Michael?
No, I'd just like to thank all the panel for...
Michael Doherty.
Sorry, Michael Doherty, former director of the Peace and Reconciliation Group. Sorry, I'm going to get a microphone. Sorry, Michael Doherty, I'm former director of the Peace and Reconciliation Group, but now working with a group called Mediate Northern Ireland. I just want to thank the panel for coming here, to be here with us. I just want to reflect just a couple of words that they said. It struck with me, and I will keep it briefly, such as Steve saying, helping people to find hope. Amazing. Giles making a comment in the first day about us not being great at listening, and I think I'd take on board what you said there. I agree with you. The avoidance syndrome of Phil has been a remark of mine for a long time, but Phil has changed it in many ways to talk about the choreography of avoidance. I think an absolutely brilliant comment. I was with Paddy Joe yesterday, Paddy Joe McLean, down in the Elder workshop. It was down in the Void Gallery, and he made a comment about acknowledging the hurt and moving on, and I thought it was fantastic to say that. It was a privilege to be in his company yesterday. Tanya, never shocks yourself, or sorry, Leila said this, never shocks you what hurt people can do to other people. It never shocks you, and I think that's helping in many ways, is trying to understand that some people are still hurting. Tanya, connecting with the human side of people has been amazing. I think it's great work that you're involved in and have been involved in this city, because I've been involved with some of the people that you've connected with, and they have made their connections as well. Giles, you made a comment yesterday at the beginning when you said things are not over if people are still affected by it. And I would like to finish off by making this comment. We in this community still need to deal with the past. And the absence of a response from the government in helping us to deal with the past is telling us that we need to do more work on this. And a comment came on yesterday about people who are still suffering is because of the injustice that's happened. We need to come, as Eamon made the comment and you made the comment, and I shared with you, become one community. But this one community needs to understand the definition of who is a victim in this community. And in doing that, I want to finish off by saying what Bill Clinton said down at the Guildhall Square, and that was, we need to finish the job. I have the hope that we will finish the job.
My name is Dr. I.P. Singh. I'm a retired GP. I have a few things to tell. First of all, this place. I have been here since 1981 and been involved in social things from 2007. We had Foyle Multicultural Forum, that's dying. Croatian works with Hollywell, she's one of those, and I'm one of the former members. Garden of Reflection has been a very successful thing here, and you get free lunch and variety of programs. And this one is better than even that, you got free drinks. And now coming to this whole conference, all speakers are really excellent. Leila's I think I met her before. That's unique. Giles' story is really encouraging. As a medical doctor, I know what he faced, what he has pulled on. I have seen him yesterday walking with a glass of wine So coming to the main point, this whole conference has been very successful. I have learned personally many new things which you look for such conferences like this.
You're now part of the process, so there is no such thing as a free lunch. That's okay.
Hello, my name is Edson Williams. I'm here with Giles, and I've been incredibly moved by all the speakers and what I've heard, and with the kindness, as Giles has shared. In London, we have a completely different experience. When they say report people that act suspicious, you would be all suspicious of greeting. I find it very interesting when you just mentioned what's next, right? Create hope achieved. What's next? And when I listened to what both Giles and Isla were saying yesterday about how do they deal with their hurt, right? Is the hate, the anger? Are you upset with somebody? Are you upset with life? And what struck me is that they both focus on something that is way bigger and way greater than what they're personally dealing with. And in the conversation of what's next, as a community, when you look at something that is bigger and greater than the personal thing that you're dealing with, that gives strength and motivation and determination to keep going. Right? When people ask us all the time, what do you possess to travel and work the way you work in your conditions? And that the man is working on something that's way bigger than him. Like, he can't comprehend the impact that he wants to achieve. And I think as a community, when you come together and you work on something, on a vision that is way greater than whatever has happened in the past, you create an engine that is unstoppable. And that's what I got from your shares. So thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say thanks to everybody. It's been brilliant, and I was sitting here scribbling. I write even poetry now and again, and I was watching. I got to see your pictures, and they were amazing. And I just wrote this as we were sitting. And excuse me because I've only just written it, so it's not edited in any way. Consider me here in this place of sorrow. Consider my children starving in this place of sorrow. Consider my mother, my father, confused and lonely in this place of sorrow. Consider the young men polarized into savagery, choosing hurt beyond hope in this place of sorrow. May we strive to educate them, to consider love, consider humanity, consider pity, consider hope beyond the hurt, and create peace in our time here beyond that peace of sorrow. Thank you.
If I could follow with a piece of poetry, you'll recognize that it's not my own. I looked this up this morning. Shows you what my life is like. I need to get out more of. I am part of all that I have met, yet all experience is an arch where through gleams that untravelled world whose margins fade forever and forever when I move. And I think this event has been, for me, an experience. I'm punch drunk at the moment with emotion. And at the workshop yesterday with Steve, I came away with this feeling that what it encapsulated for me was that it wasn't didactic, it wasn't conceptual, it was creating a space where young people could look at themselves without fear and a sense of safety. And I think that encapsulates the whole concept of the Garden of Reflection. And thanks to all the chairs. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Dennis Golden. The feedback from the workshops is that there is great hope for the future, a future where religious difference is irrelevant, and that should be very easy to achieve. If religion is religion, there should be love of your neighbour. But here, religious difference is paralleled by a cultural, political, national difference. And I wonder if any of the feedback from the workshops has a vision of what the future might be, or is it as unpredictable as Eamon suggests?
In terms of the future, whether you can sort of see people coming together.
Well, and what's the well, I mean, where you have two extreme poles, one an aspiration to remain British and one aspiration to become Irish. What's the future for Northern Ireland? Will it be one or the other, or something completely different?
Leila, do you want to field that question? Because you, I mean, obviously, clearly, in your part of the world, you deal with difference day and daily.
To be honest, as I said earlier, in my opinion, it's all superficial. It's all superficial definitions. I think my most important question would be, can people be who they want to be as human beings, as someone said just now, without fear? Can people express themselves and be as different as can be, whether it's with a disability, different color, different religion, maybe practice yoga, maybe, as this Sufi said, some people just cry in the morning and this is their way of meditation. My wish is people will liberate themselves from these slogans, actually. That's my wish.
Yeah.
Any other contributions here?
Mary Casey. The contributions and the listening that I have participated in yesterday and today more and more convince me of the benefit of this place that Eamon and his team have created for society here in this city. The work now that has to be done is that with a devolved administration and with community planning in place, and with elected representatives, that we need to help see the way forward for our society through the establishment of an open government network and an open government partnership that has been established in England, and Britain and Ireland have agreed to it, but it didn't come down through the Good Friday Agreement for Northern Ireland because other things were in their minds. And if that open government partnership could come into play, that would give us in the community a unified approach to the needs of all within our society. And I would hope that out of this, and with the community development work that this building is engaged in, and all of the participants and groups that live in this building and work in this building are engaged in, that that would be a goal that they would go after. Because we can change society by helping politicians to do the right things through the establishment of an open government partnership.
Warren, there's over there, there's a lady.
Sorry. Yeah. Just point out, by the way, not being partly political, but one of the actual literal architects of the Good Friday Agreement is
Palestinian woman is here. I'd love to hear
that. Political representatives.
I don't see her.
And I always thought that the civic forum element of the Good Friday Agreement was a hugely important thing for our community, you know. Mark thought in my head about that. Thanks, Mary, for that. Sorry.
I just want to honor the work that, well, all of the chairs have done, but especially
Taya and Steve. My own background is theater, and I'm here with my colleagues at the Playhouse.
Excuse me, that's not a Craigan accent?
No, it's not. No, I'm from Washington, D.C., and I'm studying up at Ulster University for the semester, and studying peace and conflict, and just it's been an honor to live and work in Derry this semester and to encounter all of the people in the community, talking about how welcoming the Derry community is, even though there aren't any vegetarian restaurants.
Or Palestinian restaurant.
Or Palestinian. There's a Lebanese restaurant, but it's expensive. So, but no, yeah, I've never felt more welcome in a city that's not my own, and even compared to my own, than I have in Derry. And I just feel honored that I've been able to have this experience, and very privileged that I've been able to have this experience of encountering the people of Derry. But I particularly want to honor what Taya and Steve are doing in encouraging the voice of victim survivors, of ex-combatants, of young people, and just encouraging them to speak and encouraging them to write about their experiences and to share out. As someone who works in theater, there is a lot of emphasis on voice and being able to express your voice and to express yourself, but I think this conference and also my experience in Derry has really caused me to look at the idea of reflection as just as important to rehabilitation and to healing as the sharing of voices and the listening to voices. The introspective reflection is extremely important. I was in Belfast on Monday at Healing Through Remembering, and just the idea of having a day of remembrance, June 21st, the solstice, when we can take our own time and within our own communities and our own minds just appreciate what we've been through and what we want to do, and also living in the present moment. So that kind of triangle of time that we experience as human beings and as people living in a society with each other, simultaneously, the internal life and the external life. So I think that the Garden of Reflection is a very powerful place for that, and I'm really honored that I get to experience the Garden of Reflection as well as the encouragement of voices that I'm getting through the Playhouse. So thank you very much.
Paul, can I just give a piece of information on that? It is hoped that the garden will officially open the weekend of the 21st of June, the summer solstice and the day of reflection. It might be the...
A long day,
A long day. Yeah, that'll be a long day, all right.
It's a big hope at this stage,
it's a big hope you look out the window at this. Well, we'll get there.
It's all about hope.
Yeah.
Hope beyond the hurt. Look, come here, thanks a million, all of you. I think we heard from everybody who wants to say something about it.
Paul,
Yeah.
since we've heard a lot
Yeah.
of talk about a market and vegetarian and organic, can I put a plug in? That tomorrow in the Craft Village at 12 o'clock there is an artisan market opening, and hopefully that will continue for quite a few weeks. So Steve, if you're about, you're more than welcome, as is everyone here in the room.
Artisan market at the Craft Village.
Yeah.
Excellent, great, good to hear it. Fantastic. Brilliant.
Good plug.
And it kind of almost leads me nicely to the fact that lunch is due to be served yeah, at 1:45. So that's in about 5 minutes' time. And please don't go just yet, okay? Because after lunch, I'll be talking to Giles about his amazing new book coming out based on photographs which is taken down through his career as a photographer. It's been a kind of a roller coaster of a career for all different sorts of reasons. I'm looking forward immensely to talking to Giles about that, and his images are powerful. We'll be discussing all of that and you know what has happened to make him the photographer that he is, a highly acclaimed and powerful, brilliant photographer. That'll be happening after lunch at about 13:30, 1:30. So you hang around for that, Leila, because I think you've a wee notion of Giles. I've noticed that you've become very fond of him.
But how about singing a song all together? I'm telling you, it's going to be more connecting than all the talk we did.
Have you? It was old and no, wrong song.
To everything there turn. No one is
Yes.
singing.
Yeah,
No,
start.
we don't know the song.
You don't go. Just
Yeah,
start.
go.
You're blind, not deaf, Leila.
No,
We'll
just-
join in, okay? We'll join in.
Just start. Everybody will do it.
Everything turn, turn, turn.
There is a season, turn, 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 and a time to every purpose under heaven.
Come on, guys.
No, I've never heard it before.
Yeah, what is it? The Buffy Saint-Marie song.
Shooby-dooby-doo. Da-da-da-da-da. Look, there's one thing that Giles said earlier on, which I can vouch for. When he was talking about this other pastime of his as a beekeeper, he talked about how the bees can change and their mood can be changed and so on by blowing smoke on them. I'm about to test that theory in the next few minutes. Okay, lunch will be served, 1:45, just outside, and as many of you can, we'd be delighted to see you back at 1:30 for a conversation with Giles Dooley. And thanks for your attention,
Hold on.
your attendance. It's been fantastic and rewarding
Well,
and
I've been
enriching
given
and
some
brilliant.
weird and wonderful
Steve
things
Layla,
around the world.